Hey, welcome back to The Dive. Gold price, the Bitcoin versus gold debate, interest rates, company updates, and an outlook for gold for 2022 are some of the topics that our guest will dive into today. He is the founder and executive chairman of Found Gold. Collin Kettell is joining us today. But before we bring you today's video, consider giving that subscribe button some love. Hey, Collin, welcome to The Dive.
Hey, Cassandra, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so let's start off with the gold price. Prices have surged near their highest level in 5 months. What do you think is driving the price of gold right now?
Yeah, no, gold prices have surged, and most significantly over the last few days, we've seen gold prices holding up and rising in the face of a rising U.S. dollar, which is, something that demonstrates a lot of strength because, of course, gold is priced in U.S. dollars. I've been saying for several months that gold is ready to move, and I think what it was going to take for gold to move is a rotation of money starting to come out of these risk-on assets. So the S&P 500, real estate, cryptocurrencies have all been surging. And I think a lot of that has to do with the amount of cheap money that's been floating around. So historically, what's happened is as we've entered inflationary periods and the Fed gets to the point of beginning a Fed rate hike cycle, that's where you've had significant lows in gold. And so what you've seen over the last few months is initially a few months ago, people thought October 2022 is going to be the beginning of the Fed rate hike cycle. Inflation surged, so now we're seeing May. I think that that's going to creep back. You're seeing even Fed officials saying, I think we need to, look at moving this up. And so that is all coming into a storm. And this is where gold performs.
Mm-hmm. So now gold is obviously a massive asset class. Not to turn this into a Bitcoin versus gold debate, but it could be argued the price of Bitcoin brought in so much FOMO because it was, at least until recently, a smaller asset class to push around. Do you think gold can realistically make a move to $3,000 given how large the overall asset class is?
Yeah, I do. Gold is a large asset. You look at bigger markets, though, out there that do exist. Oil and copper in the commodity space are bigger markets. Of course, their demand supply situation is different than gold, where gold is held as a monetary asset. It's not used as much as, say, copper and oil, which is 100% used when it's purchased. But you've seen huge moves in several commodities this year. You've seen certain commodities move up 20, 30, 40% in a matter of a few months. And then historically speaking, if you look at gold, we have seen significant moves. Look at 2001 to 2011, gold went from $275 an ounce to $2,000 an ounce. Remember, the money supply now versus what it was 20 years ago is significantly higher. So there's a lot more dollars floating around. As dollars start to seek protection in gold, you're going to see a significant move up in the gold price. I think $3,000 is an inevitability. My question is it ultimately going to go to 4 or 5, 6? And that's going to be interesting to watch.
Definitely. Okay, so Canada seems to be more aggressive about interest rate talk than the US. Do you think this is just lip service, or do you think we could start to see Macklem raise rates?
I must admit, I do a lot of work with Canadian companies, but I don't follow Canadian policy as closely as maybe I should, or Canadian politics. But what I will say, jumping off of that question, is you're seeing all of the central banks around the world starting to have to do the same thing, which is they're starting to have to raise rates. And the U.S. might have a little bit more flexibility because it is the reserve currency to be a little bit further behind the curve. But if you go to countries like Brazil, Turkey, Russia, I mean, these countries are having to put rates up a lot faster than the US. And I think you're seeing that in other countries as well. The UK is fighting pretty bad inflation. So the trend is going to be that all of the central banks are essentially going to have to do the same thing. It's just going to take a little bit of time for each one to make that decision based on the circumstances that they're in.
Okay, all right, let's talk about Newfound Gold now. One of the most successful stories out of the Canadian capital markets over the last decade. Could you give us a high-level overview for our audience new to the story?
I can. Newfound Gold's been a tremendous success. we staked a district-sized project, and by district size, I mean 100 kilometers long. It's about 15 kilometers wide. It covers a 100-kilometer section of essentially where two tectonic plates came together. And we found in 2019 a bonanza hit of gold. By many accounts, it's the best drill hole. It was the best drill hole, I should say, in Newfoundland and Labrador up to that point that had ever been recorded. It's 19 meters and 93 grams. That put us on a path towards IPO. Since then, we've got really good shareholder base. So the company that I'm behind has about 30% of the shares. Eric Sprott, per his most recent $48 million investment, which is supposed to close next week, is now up to 23% of the company. And then another company, Novo Resources, owns 10. So we're in a very unique position where you've got three significant shareholders who own, plus 60% of the stock. The story itself is a dream come true. I mean, ever since that first hole, we kept drilling. We found a large, very high grade mineralized system, and that has set off a gold rush in Newfoundland, a modern day gold rush. We haven't seen one in quite some time, and people are enthusiastic, and people who don't even buy gold or subscribe to gold are buying newfound gold because that's how exciting it is.
Awesome. Congratulations on all the success. So what is the plan for the capital, and what do you think caught Eric's eye?
Eric seems to have a keen eye on high grade, and he's the best in the world at finding it the right stage and making money on it. More specifically, though, Eric was very involved in a company called Newmarket, which was purchased by Kirkland Lake back in 2016. And he very much so orchestrated that purchase. And in doing so, he became the largest shareholder of Kirkland Lake. And that catapulted him back into the status of being a billionaire. What he saw at the Fosterville mine was a very high grade type of mineralization called epizonal. And epizonal essentially is super high grade, packed into a small amount of rock, and it can be extremely profitable. And so when he started looking at what we had in Newfoundland on the other side of the planet, Dr. Quinton Henning, a geologist that he has a very close relationship to, and is actually one of our directors, looked and said, my goodness, this is the exact same thing that I witnessed at Fosterville. And even better maybe is we found it right at surface and it's wide open. And so, that got Eric very excited. And then since then, he's continued to watch the discovery unfold. We've now drilled over 100,000 meters. So your second, or maybe your first question, how are we going to spend the money? Well, we're running one of the most active drill programs in Canada right now. We're supposed to drill 400,000 meters during this program. We've got 10 rigs turning. We're going up to 14 rigs. And that means we're producing a tremendous amount of data and drill results.
Mm-hmm. So the company's been drilling towards a couple of known gold vein systems. And you announced on November 4th that you hired independent consultants to look into quality assurance and quality control aspects of the sampling program. At Queensway, the consultants identified inconsistencies between the grades of the core sent away to the lab to be assayed and the grades that matched the core to be held for quality assurances. Could you give us some color on this? And also, when do you anticipate seeing the results?
Yeah, I unfortunately can't give too much more color on top of the very detailed press release that we put out. As you pointed out, we had a routine QAQC check. This happened back in May with 10 samples, and those 10 samples didn't show anything of significance, no significant bias or any concern. 30 samples were then taken a few weeks ago. The results came back, and our third-party consultants looked and saw something that they didn't like, which was demonstrated on the scatter plot in the release that we put out. Unfortunately, sometimes in these situations, you end up with more questions than answers, which is kind of where we are. There are three different possibilities that we outlined. One is there's a nugget effect in these systems. The second one is there could potentially be some lab bias. We're using two different labs, so that can create discrepancies. And then the third one is there could somehow be some type of a sampling bias that's happening on site. And we just don't have any further information at the moment. My job and what I've been working on since that release came out is how to get us a conclusion on what's going on, and also how to get us back to normal operations so that we can get past that and continue to delineate this high-grade system. So unfortunately, I don't have too much more information than we've already put out.
That's all right. All right. So one more thing before we let you go here. What is your outlook for gold for 2022?
I usually shy away from these questions, but I'm actually eager to answer this right now. I think gold is going to go. I think it's going to be a blockbuster commodity for 2022. We're coming out of a period where people absolutely hate gold and it's very underloved. And yet we're in a situation where gold historically has done remarkably well. So I think the next 6, 12, 18 months could be exactly what we've been waiting for in the gold community to finally see the gold price go up and the associated stocks to really start getting some love.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Collin. We love covering Canadian successful stories.
Perfect. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. We'll be back again tomorrow with more great content. So be sure to stay tuned by hitting that notification bell and smashing that subscribe button.